properly. So by now, in this class, we have fully discussed, we have completed Unit 1, and Unit 1 consists of 3 chapters. We have completed all the 3 chapters there. And also we have completed the first chapter in Unit 2 as well. So last week in the class, you did a paper from this first chapter in Unit 2, which is about the theory of demand and elasticity of demand. And in today's class, I'm going to discuss the answers to that question paper. I have developed the marking scheme and I'm going to explain each answer to you, right? So we will get into the discussion. Look at this main question 1, subpart 1. The question is, are the demand and quantity demanded the same concepts? Explain your answer. See, this is what we discussed on the very first day of this lesson. I told you very clearly that demand is one thing and quantity demanded is a different thing. These are related, but these are two different concepts. Clear? When it comes to the demand, we are referring to this. We said during a given period of time, when other factors remain constant, various quantities that consumers have the ability to buy and are willing to buy at various prices prevailing in the market for a good is known as demand. That's how we define demand. So here the main focus should be given to this highlighted part, where we say that demand refers to various quantities that consumers have the ability to buy and are willing to buy at various prices. Now, for example, if I try to explain you this using a demand schedule, look at this demand schedule. On this side, we have prices. On the other side, we have quantity demanded, quantities in simple terms. And if you look at these prices, 0, 10, 20, 30, and this will be from 400, 300, 200, 100, and let's add one more. This is 40, and this will be 0. If I ask this question, what do you see in this table now? What do you see in this table? In simple terms, you can tell me that you see various quantities at various prices. What do you see? You see various quantities at various prices. So that we say that this entire table presents you demand. The entire table presents demand. And that's why I told you, when you explain the term demand, you need to highlight this part, that it's about various quantities that consumers have the ability to buy and are willing to buy at various prices prevailing in the market for a good. However, when it comes to the quantity demanded, it's about a single quantity that you select under specific price. One specific quantity comes under specific price, you recognize as the quantity demanded. Quantity demanded. And when you explain quantity demanded, you need to highlight that part, a specific quantity at a specific price. Look at this answer. It says, during a given period of time, when other factors remain constant, see, we say a specific quantity at a specific price prevailing in the market for a good is known as quantity demanded. So that is the main difference between demand and quantity demanded. When it comes to the demand, it's about the various quantities at various prices, whereas the quantity demanded presents a specific quantity that is coming under specific price. So this highlighted 200 here is the quantity demanded under the price rupees 20. And this entire table presents different quantities at different prices, so that we say that this entire table presents demand. So that's about the first question. And let's go to the second question coming under main question 1. What's the difference between individual demand and market demand? This is not a difficult question, right? As the name suggests you, individual demand is the demand arise from a single consumer in the market, whereas the market demand presents the demand arise from all the consumers in the market. Now, for example, if we assume that in a given hypothetical market, we only have three consumers, the demand arises from all these three consumers we recognize as the market demand. And the demand of a selected consumer we recognize as the individual demand. So that is the main difference. So if you look at the given answers here, it says individual demand during a given period of time when other factors remain constant, various quantities that a single consumer has the ability to buy and is willing to buy at various prices prevailing in the market is known as the individual demand. So I have written this in singular, right? I'm referring to a singular, I'm referring to single consumer. Clear? And when I explain the market demand, during a given period of time, when other factors remain constant, various quantities that all the consumers, see, all the consumers have the ability to buy and are willing to buy at various prices prevailing in the market for a good is market demand. That's in plural. Atana a single consumer, metana all the consumers in the market. So that's what you need to highlight. That's the difference between individual demand and the market demand. Right. The third question coming under the main question 1. What are the determinants of demand? Develop the demand function based on demand determinants. See that now. I hope you understand the question, but somehow when you write the answers, we have earlier discussed that there are two different forms of demand. One is individual demand and the other one is market demand. So when you recognize the determinants, you should recognize the determinants separately for individual demand and for market demand. And to be more specific, there are 6 determinants of individual demand and there are 7 determinants of market demand. අතන තියෙන හයම මෙතනක් තියෙනවා, and in addition to that you have this under the determinants of market demand. In this list you get this additionally, number of buyers. So in the exact same way, when you develop the demand function, you need to develop the demand function separately. One you develop for the individual demand, the other function you develop for the market demand. So this is how we normally develop the demand function. I know that you all can understand that. The only difference between the two is in the second demand function. In the demand function where we represent the market demand, we have this number of consumers, capital N, in the inside the function. But in the first one, we don't have that. That's the only difference. Right. So I'm not going to discuss one by one because these are easy ones. You can understand them anyway. So we will move to the fourth one in main question 1. The fourth part is define the law of demand. I mean, like when you hear the term define the law of demand, it's about this negative relationship that exists between P and QD. Or you won't get 4 marks. You need to write it properly. But the core is it's about the negative relationship that exists between P and QD. So when you explain that, you need to explain it in this way. It's about the negative relationship that exists between price of the considered good and its quantity demanded. On one side, you select price, that's the first variable, and on the other side, you select the quantity demanded. So you just need to explain that it's about this negative relationship that exists between P and QD when other factors remain constant during a given period of time. Even this part is a must, right? Even this part is a must. So for writing that, I have given you 4 marks. And in the 5th part, I ask you to write about the assumptions that we use in law of demand. Without these assumptions, the law of demand will not be always true. But under these four assumptions, the law of demand is true. So what are the four assumptions? The first one is, we say, when we define the law of demand, we say that we consider a normal good, not a given good, right? We are not considering an inferior good, a given good. No, we consider a normal good. The second assumption is, we say we consider the behavior of a rational consumer. That's the second assumption. The third one, we say that we consider a particular period of time, not one specific time point. No, it takes a period of time to see this negative relationship that exists between P and QD. And also we say, when we define the law of demand, except this price, all the other factors that we discussed here, all these other factors except price remain constant. That's the fourth assumption. So I repeat this part again. This law of demand is true only under these four assumptions. Right. So that's about the first question. And now we will move to the main question 2. In main question 2, first part, I'm asking, why does the demand curve slope downward from left to right? Explain the answer. So initially you can write that this demand curve slopes downwards from left to right due to the negative relationship that exists between P and QD due to the law of demand. But then again, just for writing that part, I won't give you 6 marks. So that you need to later on explain that there are two reasons to have this negative relationship. If not, there are two reasons to have this law of demand, and you need to explain those two reasons as well. And for explaining all of these, I have allocated 6 marks. So read the answer. It says the reasons for the downward slope of the demand curve are the same reasons for having a negative relationship between P and QD. And as I mentioned, there are two reasons. The first one is substitution effect, and the second one is income effect. Right? And later on, you need to explain these two, substitution effect and income effect. So let me explain these two once again to you. I have explained these ones in the class when we do the theoretical parts. I have explained this already, but let me do it one more time. Right. Let's assume that the price of a Coca-Cola is 100 and the quantity demanded is also same 100. Right. So let me write again, price of a Coca-Cola is 100, and let's assume that the Pepsi price was 150. See that now, which product is relatively cheaper? Coca-Cola, right now Coca-Cola is relatively cheaper and Pepsi is 150, so that's relatively expensive. So it's obvious that 100 consumers use Coca-Cola because the taste looks much more familiar, same. So 100 consumers are using Coca-Cola, are consuming Coca-Cola. But later on, what happens? The Coca-Cola price get increased from 100 to 200, and what we know, when the price get increased to 200, the quantity demanded should decrease to 20. And there are two reasons for this decrease in the quantity demanded. One is the substitution effect, the other one is the income effect. So let me first explain this substitution effect. Right. Earlier, as I mentioned, Coca-Cola was relatively cheaper, so that consumers were consuming Coca-Cola. And now, see what has happened. Coca-Cola price has gone up to 200. Now, which product is relatively cheaper? Now, Pepsi is relatively cheaper. It's not 100 anymore. Coca-Cola price is 200, so that Pepsi is relatively cheaper. If there's no much difference between the taste, then it's obvious that some consumers, not some actually, the majority of the consumers move from Coca-Cola to Pepsi. So this movement, this reaction of the consumers, we recognize as the substitution effect. And this reaction occurs due to the relative price of the two products. Earlier, Coca-Cola was relatively cheaper, so that consumers were consuming that. But now, compared to the new price of Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola is relatively cheaper. So that they are moving from Coca-Cola to Pepsi-Cola. So this reaction, this response of the consumer to the relative price of the goods, we recognize as the substitution effect. Right? So that's what I have explained under the topic. If you read this, I have written the same thing. The response of the consumer, the reaction of the consumer to the relative price change due to the change in the price of the considered good when other factors remain constant during a given period of time is known as a substitution effect. It's the same thing that I explained earlier. But what's meant by the income effect? To explain the income effect, let me change this slightly. Let's assume that the price is 100 and the quantity demanded is also 100, like in the previous case. But this time, we are focusing on the consumer's nominal income, the rupee amount that he receives as the salary. Let's assume that to be rupees 100,000. So the monthly salary of the person is 100,000. So right now, under the price rupees 100, he has the ability to purchase 1,000 units of Coca-Cola. They have the ability, they have this purchasing power to purchase, they have this power to purchase 1,000 units of Coca-Cola. But what happens when the Coca-Cola price gets increased to 200? The purchasing power, the ability to buy reduces. So under the new price, what happens to the purchasing power? Earlier it was 1,000 units, but under the new price, it get decreased to 500 units. Then it's obvious that the consumers reduce the quantity demanded. See, what finally happens, price get increased and quantity demanded get decreased. So that's the second reason for having this negative relationship between P and QD. Now, in this case, you just need to, under the income effect, you just need to explain the fact that when the price goes up, it negatively affects to the consumer's real income, their purchasing power, so that the consumers reduce the quantity demanded. Right. If you look at this answer, that's what I have explained. Read this. It says, the response of the consumer to the changes in real income or the purchasing power due to a change in the price of the considered good when other factors remain constant during a given period of time is known as income effect. It's the same thing. Right. So for writing this entire thing, writing this whole concept, I have allocated 6 marks. Right. Second question coming under the main question 2. Explain the substitution effect, income effect, and the price effect for different types of goods when price increases. So this is what we discussed week before the last week. At the last part of the lesson, this is what we discussed. And there I mentioned that for any type of good, we discussed this for the whole 2 hours in that class. So I think that you all remember that. I told you that for any type of good, substitution effect is always negative. For it could be normal goods, inferior goods, given goods. For any type of good, substitution effect is negative. But for the different goods, the income effect is different. Now, for example, if it's for normal goods, the income effect is positive. And for inferior goods, the income effect is negative. That's why we really recognize them as inferior goods. There's a negative relationship between the purchasing power or the income and the real income and the quantity demanded. So that we say that for inferior goods, the income effect is negative. So that's what you need to explain first, right? That's what you need to explain first. Substitution effect for any good is negative. See, negative. This is also negative. This is also negative. And then the price effect, where's this? Sorry, the income effect is positive for normal goods, but for inferior goods, income effect is also negative. And given goods are a type of inferior goods, so that's obvious that even for these given goods, the income effect to be negative. And then come back to normal goods. Due to both negative substitution effect and positive income effect, due to both, the quantity demanded decreases when price increases. Due to both these reasons, the quantity demanded decreases when price increases, and as a result, for normal goods, the price effect will be negative because on one side price increases and on the other side quantity demanded decreases, so that the price effect is negative. So you need to explain that under the normal goods. And when it comes to inferior goods, earlier I told you that given goods are also a type of inferior good, but there's a significant difference between these two. When it comes to inferior goods, yes, the substitution effect and the income effect both are negative, but the negative substitution effect is much more powerful than the negative income effect. So what happens when the price increases, right? When the price increases due to the negative substitution effect, quantity demanded decreases, and due to the negative income effect, quantity demanded increases slightly. It increases slightly because we say that the substitution effect is more powerful. So when price increases, finally what happens? Quantity demanded decreases by a significant amount, so that the price effect is negative for inferior goods. So similar to normal goods, even for inferior goods, the price effect is negative. When price increases, QD decreases. And then finally, for given goods, this is a special case of inferior goods. Now here what happens, the substitution effect and the income effect both are negative, but unlike in typical inferior goods, the negative income effect is much more powerful than the negative substitution effect. So that what happens, due to the negative substitution effect, when price increases, quantity demanded decreases. But since the negative income effect is much more powerful when the price increases, quantity demanded decreases significantly. And the outcome will be that when the price increases, the outcome will be even the quantity demanded increases. So that unlike for any other good, for given goods, the price effect will be positive. So that's what you need to explain. And I saw that in these answers that you have written, you had drawn the exact same tables that we drew in the class. I mean, it's good if you really remember that. But if you have copied, I don't know whether you have copied or I don't know that actually. If you have copied, that's really bad, right? Copying will not support you in the exam. හැබැයි මතකෙන් ලිව්වා නම් කිසිම අවුලක් නැහැ. එහෙම නැතුව කොපි කළා නම් නෝට් එකේ තියෙන එක එහෙමම බලාගෙන ලිව්වා නම් මොකද ඒ ටේබල්ස් තුන ඒ විදිහටම ඒ ඇරෝ එක කොහොමත් එකම විදිහට තමයි එන්නේ. ඒකේ කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. එකලා මේක නෙමෙයි. කීප දෙනෙක්. ඔයා ඒක හරියට කළා නම් කිසිම අවුලක් නැහැ. ඔයා ඒක බලාගෙන කළා නම් එතන ඔයාට කිසිම සපෝට් එකක් එන්නේ නැහැ එක්සෑම් එකේ. ඒකත් මතක තියාගන්න. හරි. So that's about the second question coming under the main question 2. Right? And now we will move to the third question. This is where we get these two individual demand schedules, and I ask you to develop the market demand schedule and the market demand equation. Right. So let's read the question properly. It says the following table presents the demand schedule for two individuals in the market. So this is the demand schedule of the consumer A, and here you see the demand schedule of the consumer B. And within brackets, I have mentioned that this entire market consists of these two individuals. The entire market consists of these two individuals. And by giving this data, I ask you to develop the market demand schedule and the market demand equation. So as I mentioned here in this question, market demand is the totality of individual demand. If you have three individuals in a given market, the total of demand arises from all the three individuals we recognize as the market demand. And you can apply that same theory, the same concept for this question. If the market demand is the totality of all the individual demand, then you can simply write the market prices as it is given to us in the main question, and you can find the quantity demanded, the market quantities, by taking the totals of individual demand. See, 100 plus 200 is 300, and then 80 plus 160 will be 240, 60 plus 120 will be 180, then it's 120, and finally you get 60. So what do you need to do? You just need to add these figures, right? You need to add these figures to develop the market demand schedule. You know, add them. Right. So that's just one part of the question. And the second part is to develop the market demand equation. So we know that the typical demand equation is the general form of the demand equation is QD equals A minus BP. Normally, we find the term B first. So B is equal to, let me write it. B is equal to delta QD divided by delta P. So delta QD is the difference between any two QD values. So let me just pick randomly. Let me pick this value and then this value. The difference between these two is 180. And delta P is the difference of the corresponding price value. So that's the difference between this 0 and then this 30. And the difference will be 6. Sorry, the division will be 6. 180 divided by 30 will be 6. So for B, we get 6. And we have this equation to find A. A is QD plus B times P. But my question is, do we need to really apply this equation to find A? No. You don't need to apply this equation to find A. The reason, if you have understood the meaning of A, you will understand why there's no such requirement to apply this equation to find A. So what's A? Tell me what's A. The letter A stands for the quantity demanded when the price is 0. If you have analyzed that equation properly, or if you at least remember the things that we have discussed in the classes, you should have remembered this by now. A stands for the QD when P is 0. And that amount of QD when P is 0 is clearly visible in this table. It's visible. So what do you need to do? Just pick that value as A without calculation. So A is directly 300. Now you can, with the help of these two values A and B, you can develop the demand equation. 300 minus 6 times P. Right? QD equals 300 minus 6 times P. And that's how I have developed this equation. All right. So that's the answer for part 3 of main question 2. Now come to part 4 of main question 2. It's asking, are the change in quantity demanded and change in demand the same? See the question again. Are the change in demand and the quantity demanded the same? Earlier, I told you very clearly that quantity demanded is one thing and demand is something else. They are related, but still they are different. If these are two different concepts, if quantity demanded is one thing and demand is something else, the change in quantity demanded and the change in demand must be again two different concepts. Clear? So these are clearly two different concepts. Change in quantity demanded is one thing, change in demand is another thing. So what's the difference between change in quantity demanded and change in demand? What's the difference? The difference is change in quantity demanded. A change in quantity demanded will arise in the market when the price of the good changes. Look at this entire thing. During a given period of time, when other factors remain constant, a change in the price of the good changes its quantity demanded. So what remains constant here? All other factors except price remain constant. So if you don't remember the factors other than the price, look at this. This is what we discussed. 10-20 minutes earlier, this is what we discussed. Here you develop this entire list of factors that determines the demand. Now I'm telling you that when all these other factors remain constant, a change in price will create a change in quantity demanded. That's what I'm explaining here. And then when it comes to change in demand, I'm telling you that during a given period of time, when the price of the good remains constant, when the price remains constant, a change in other factors will create a change in demand. That's the difference. When it comes to the change in quantity demanded, only price changes and all the other factors remain constant. And when it comes to a change in demand, the price remains constant and all the other factors could change. Clear? So that's what you need to write mainly. And other than that, you can also mention this point as well. A change in quantity demanded will not make any changes in the demand curve, but it will lead to a movement along the demand curve. Now, for example, if this is the demand curve, and if this is the current point that we are considering, when the quantity demanded changes, this point can move upwards or downwards. Clear? It can move upwards or downwards. On this side, you have the quantities. On this side, on this axis, we present the prices. So when the quantity demanded changes, this point moves maybe upwards or maybe downwards. And it won't make any change in the demand curve. But however, when it comes to a change in demand, right? When it comes to a change in demand, this change in demand will create a shift, will make a shift. It will shift the whole demand curve. If other factors change in a favorable way, then the demand will increase so that the demand curve will shift to the right side. Clear? If other factors change in an unfavorable way, then demand will decrease and the demand curve will shift to the left side. The whole curve changes when the demand changes, but the point, just the point moves upwards or downwards when the quantity demanded changes. So that's what you need to explain. I hope you understand that. Right. Now we will move to the next question. Question 3, part 1. Differentiate between expansion of quantity demanded and contraction of quantity demanded using suitable diagrams. So this we have already explained under the previous question 4. We have explained the same thing. I told you here that when the quantity demanded changes, a point on the demand curve moves maybe upwards or downwards, and that we recognize as contraction of demand, or we recognize that as an expansion in quantity demanded. මොකක්ද ඒ කිව්වේ කියලා ඔයාලට තේරුම් නැත්නම් මෙන්න මේක බලා ගන්න. Right, we'll take this to the other side. Now I'll draw it once again here. I told you that when a change in quantity demanded happens, right, this point on the demand curve moves upward or it moves downwards. Now we will analyze this movement, right? We will analyze this movement. Now we will take this one first, a downward movement. Consider this to be the first one. So when this point on this side you have quantity, here you get the prices, on this axis you get the prices. So if this point moves downwards, what does that indicate? What happens to the quantity demanded when the point moves downwards? What happens to the quantity demanded? Quantity demanded increases gradually. Earlier it was this much, but now it increases gradually. When the point moves downwards, QD increases, and that is what we recognize as the expansion of quantity demanded. For this expansion to happen, price of the good should decrease, because then only QD will increase. We learned that under the law of demand, when price decreases, QD increases, so that the point moves downwards, and that we recognize as expansion of quantity demanded. And when the opposite happens, now for example, when the price increases, QD decreases, and the point on the demand curve moves upward, and that we recognize as the contraction of quantity demanded. Right? Here I have explained the same thing. Right? We'll read this and see. Expansion of quantity demanded. It says, during a given period of time, when other factors remain constant, a decrease in the price of the good increases its quantity demanded. As a result, a point on the demand curve moves downward along the demand curve, and this situation we recognize as the expansion of quantity demanded. And there in the second one, in the next one, I have explained the opposite of that. So I believe that there's no such requirement to explain this again. Hope you all understand that. So that's what you need to explain. දැන් එකම දේ ඔයාලා මේව ලියනකොට ඔයාලට තේරෙනවා ඇති සර් මට මේක තේරෙනවා කියලා. මට මේක තේරෙනවා කියන එක හරි. හැබැයි මේ ඔයා මේක ලියනකොට ඒක කියවන මනුස්සයට තේරෙන්න ලියන්න ඕන. ඒක තමයි ඉකොන් වල තියෙන කතන්දරේ. ඔයා පාඩම් කළාට වැඩක් නැහැ. ඔයා ආන්සර්ස් ලියලා පුරුදු වෙන්න ඕන. ආන්සර්ස් ලියලා පුරුදු වෙන්නේ නැති තාක්කල් ඔයාට හරියට අයිඩියා එක කමියුනිකේට් කරන්න බැරි වෙනවා. ඒකයි ප්‍රශ්නේ. Right. So come to the second question under the main question 3. What does it say? What is the relationship that exists between prices of the related goods and the demand? See, you see only one question, but for this question, there are two answers. There is one question, but for this question, there are two answers. Why is that? Because when I say related goods in general, there are two different types of related goods. On one side, you have substitutes. On the other side, you have complementary goods. Clear? On one side, you have substitutes. On the other side, you have complementary goods. Complementary goods. So you need to write it separately. The relationship that exists between the prices of substitutes and the demand is one form, and the relationship that exists between the prices of complementary goods and the demand is in a different form. So these are two different relationships, and you need to explain both separately. Right. Now, for example, we'll pick the first one, substitutes. We will take two substitutes. Right, we will take two substitutes and do the discussion. We'll once again take price of Pepsi and demand of Coca-Cola. These are two substitutes. So as we discussed previously, when the price of a Pepsi is 100, let's assume the Coca-Cola demand is also 100. And when the price of a Pepsi get increased to 200, what happens to the demand of Coca-Cola? That's obvious. You don't need to study economics to understand that. If you have gone to the school canteen, you can understand that. When the price of a Pepsi Cola get increased 200, from 100 to 200, obviously the friends or maybe you will demand more of Coca-Cola and less of Pepsi Cola. So what will happen to the Coca-Cola demand? It will increase. I don't know the exact value, but I know that it will be definitely higher than 100. So what happened ultimately? Ultimately, the price of Pepsi Cola got increased. The price of Pepsi Cola got increased. And as a result, the demand for Coca-Cola also got increased. See, then what's the sort of relationship that exists between the prices of substitutes and the demand of considered good? We see a positive relationship, because both variables change in the same direction. When one increases, even the other increases, so that the relationship is positive. So you need to explain that first, right? And let's keep this aside. And now we will pick two complementary goods. On one side, we have price of petrol, and on the other side, we have demand for cars. Price of petrol and demand of cars. When the petrol price is 100, let's assume the demand of cars is also 100. In a hypothetical economy, this happens. When the price of a petrol get increased to, let's say, 500, what should happen to the demand of cars? It should decrease now, right? It should decrease now. So that what's the sort of relationship that exists between the price of a complementary good and the demand for the considering good? What's the relationship? See, the price got increased, and as a result, the demand for the considered good got decreased. So that we have a negative relationship between the two variables this time. So if it's for substitutes, then we will have a positive relationship. And for complementary goods, we have a negative relationship. So that's what you need to explain in the answer. And here I have explained the same. Read this. What is the relationship that exists between the prices of related goods and the demand? The answer is the relationship that exists between the prices of related goods and the demand changes based on the nature of the related goods. It changes based on the nature. Accordingly, there's a positive relationship between price of a substitute good and the demand for considered good. However, there's a negative relationship between the price of complementary good and the demand for considered good. So that way I have explained the same thing. All right, now let's get into the third part of main question 3. Let's read this question. It says, what is meant by elasticity of demand? What are the different forms of elasticity? So when you hear this term elasticity of demand, what really comes to your mind? මේ වචනේ ආවේ නැත්තම් ඔයාට ලියන්නත් බෑ, ලියන එක වැඩකුත් නැහැ. So what really comes to your mind when you hear the term elasticity of demand? Tell me. Elasticity කියන වචනය අහුනම ඔළුවට එන්න ඕනි එකම දේ තමයි the percentage change, the sensitivity, if not the percentage change. If it's the elasticity of demand, it's about the percentage change of demand that happens when any determinant of demand changes by a particular percentage. So that's what you need to explain in the answer for the first part. What is meant by elasticity of demand, right? And then there is one more part in the question. What are the different forms of elasticity? I earlier told you that it's about the percentage change of demand that happens due to a percentage change of any determinant of demand. And depending on the determinant that you select, we can recognize various forms of elasticity. Now, for example, if you pick the price of the considered good, the percentage change of the price of the considered good, and the percentage change of demand, that particular form of elasticity you recognize as price elasticity of demand. For a different example, if you pick the percentage change of the prices of related goods and the percentage change of demand, then that particular form of elasticity you recognize as cross price elasticity of demand. In the same way, if you pick consumers, the percentage change that happens in consumers' income and the percentage change in demand, then that you recognize as the income elasticity of demand. So those are the different forms of elasticity. I believe that you can understand that. Look at this. It says, this is the answer for the first part. Elasticity of demand refers to the percentage change in demand due to a percentage change in any determinant of demand. Depending on the nature of the determinant, various forms of elasticity are identified as follows. And then I have explained these three: price elasticity of demand, cross price elasticity of demand, and finally income elasticity of demand. The reason why I have explained these three is this is where we focus in the syllabus. We only focus on these three, right? So it's the same, it's the same definition. I have only changed this. See, then now the first one says percentage change in quantity demanded due to a percentage change in price of the considered good. Here, due to a percentage change in price of the related goods, and due to a percentage change in consumers' income. I have only changed that. So that way you can develop the definition, right? So come to the fourth part. Here, it says the demand schedule for a certain good is given below. Develop the demand equation and find PED. Okay, so I have given you the demand schedule, and based on this demand schedule, you need to develop the demand equation, and later on you need to calculate PED. Okay, so we'll start. As I earlier mentioned you, the general form of the demand equation is QD equals A minus B times P. In this equation, you can find B using this equation delta QD divided by delta P. Delta QD is the difference between these two values, that's 100. And delta P is the difference between these two, that's just 10. So that for B, we get 10. And for PED, sorry, my mistake. And to calculate before PED, we need to calculate A. This time you can't really recognize the QD value when the price is 0 because it's not visible in the given demand schedule. It's not visible. So you need to calculate it using this equation QD plus B times P. So you can pick one of the coordinates randomly. Let me select this one. So it's 100 plus 10 times P is 20. Finally, you get 100 plus 200, answer is 300. Right, answer is 300. So A is 300, B is 10. So based on those two, you can develop the equation this way: 300 minus 10 times P. 300 minus 10 times P. Okay, now we get into this part, PED, right? PED. So this was a problem to some of your friends, maybe to you, because some of you asked me that here I haven't mentioned that you need to calculate PD specifically for this price or for that price. එනිසා දැන් කට්ටිය මගෙන් අහනවා so දැන් PD calculate කරන්න මට පුළුවන් මොකටද calculate කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. When the price is 10 ද when the price is 20 ද කොයි එකටද සර්ට calculate කරලා ඕනේ කියලා. ඉතින් මම එහෙම කියන්නේ මට ඕන මේකට තමයි කියලා. කියන්නේ නැත්තම් you need to understand that the real requirement is to calculate arc PED, not the point PED. That's what you need to understand. So next time, don't ask for which price you need to calculate PED. Remember, if the price is not mentioned, you just need to calculate arc PED. Right? So there are two different equations. Altogether, I gave you 5 equations to find PED. The first three are for the point PED, and the last two are for the arc PED. And let me pick this one from those two. I pick this equation, PED equals B, this is B, into P over QD. So B is how much? 10 into, actually it's a minus 10, B is a minus value. So minus 10 into price. Price, my mistake, this is wrong. The correct equation is P1 plus P2 over QD1 plus QD2. Now it's correct. So the first price is 10. The second price is 20. First QD value is 200. Second QD value is 100. So it's minus 10 into 30 over 300. 30 over 300, then the answer is minus 1, right? Answer is minus 1. This has to be minus. It's missing, but it has to be minus. So answer is minus 1. Right. So that's the question 4 coming under main question 3. Now we can move to the question number 5, right? Question number 5. In question 5, it says, for a certain good, at the price rupees 5, the quantity demanded is 160. Okay, we will tabulate this data. When the price is 5, quantity demanded is 160. PED at this price is, okay, PED at rupees 5 is minus 5 over 32. Find the quantity demanded at rupees 10. Okay. Yeah, so we can find the quantity demanded at the price rupees 10. We can do that. But before we do so, we need to develop the demand equation. Otherwise, we can't calculate the QD value when the price is 10. Right? So we will first try to calculate the value of A and B in the demand equation. Later on, let's develop the demand equation based on those. And finally, we can find the QD value when the price is 10. එහෙනම් අපි කොහොමද පටන් ගන්නෙ? We will start with this given PED value, right? As I mentioned earlier, we have 5 equations to find PED, and this time I pick this equation. So I write PED equals B into P over QD. So PED is given to us as minus 5 over 32. Is it 32? Yeah, minus 5 over 32. And then B is the unknown value that we try to find. Price, when the PED is this much, price is rupees 5. So you write 5 divided by, when the price is 5, QD is 160. That's given to us. So that's very easy. We can solve this equation for B. Then B is equal to 160 into minus 5 over 32 into 5. So this get cancelled with this one. Anyway, the answer is minus. Then this will be 5. Right? B is equal to minus 5. B is 5 or minus 5. Either way, you can take it, no problem. Okay, we found the value of B. We'll keep it here. And now we will calculate the value of A. This time to find A, we use this equation QD plus B times P. So QD, there is only one value for QD, which is 160. So it's 160 plus, this minus becomes plus here. 5 into P is also 5. So it's 160 plus 25. Answer is 185. We found A to be 185. We found B to be minus 5. With the help of these two, we can develop the demand equation as 185 minus 5 times P. But this is not the requirement of the question. The question is to recognize the QD value when P is 10. එනිසා අපි මොකද කරන්නේ? So 185 minus price into, 5 into the price is 10. So 5 into 10 is 50. So that the output will be 135. When the price is 10, right? When the price is 10, QD is 135. So that's the final answer for the question. So that's how I got this 135, right? That's how I got this 135, right? So if you need, you can write down this one. Okay, now we will move to the next one. Question 4, part 1. Is the slope of the demand curve and the price elasticity of demand the same? Explain your answer. Okay, so there are two different concepts here. On one side, we have the slope of the demand curve, and on the other side, we have the price elasticity of demand. So those are the two concepts that we need to compare. And out of these two, we have already discussed the second one, price elasticity of demand. මම කලිනුත් කිව්වා, when you hear the term price elasticity of demand, ඔළුවට එන්නම ඕනි වචනේ තමයි it's about the percentage change. වෙන මුකුත් නෙමෙයි, it's about the percentage change. May it be the elasticity of demand or the elasticity of supply that you will learn in the coming lessons. Elasticity of supply, the next lesson, it could be any. Elasticity now, it's about the percentage change. The elasticity of demand now, it's about the percentage change of demand. And if it's about the elasticity of supply, it's about the percentage change of supply. It is a elasticity now percentage. ඒක දැන් ඔළුවේ තියෙනවා. Concrete level එකට ඒක තියෙනවා. And on the other side, you have the slope. And we haven't discussed about the slope of the demand curve. So what is slope? Slope is this term B in the demand equation. Slope is this term B in the demand equation. Now, for example, if you develop the demand equation as QD equals, we'll take that previous one, 185 minus 5 times P. And we found that when the price is 10, this is 135. We found that earlier, right? So what does this 5 mean? What is this 5? 5, if not this slope, right, is the change in demand when price changes by 1 rupee. ඔයා බාගෙට හං හිටියා නම් ඔයා කියනවා සර් ඉතින් දෙකම එකනේ. එවලෙත් සර් චේන්ජ් එකක් ගැන කිව්වා මෙතනත් චේන්ජ් එකක් ගැන කියනවා. එහෙමනම් ඔයාට ඇහුනේ ඔයා හං ඉඳලා නැහැ. මොකද මම කිව්වා when it comes to the elasticity, it's about the percentage change. But here I didn't use the word percentage. I only told you that the slope represents the change of QD when the price changes by 1 rupee, not by a particular percentage. Hope you get that. If you still don't get it, let me show you, let me help you this way. Will increase the price by 1 rupee. Then the new price will be 11. Right? The new price will be 11. So 11 into 5 will be 55. I mean, replace this P with 11 and do the calculation. 5 into 11 will be 55. 185 minus 55 will be 130. Increase this price once again by 1 rupee, 12. 12 into 5 will be 60. 185 minus 60 will be 125. 185 minus 60, 125. Okay, what has happened here? Price has increased by 1 rupee. And what has happened here? Quantity demanded has decreased by 5. And that 5 is visible here. Again, what has happened here? Price has increased by 1. And what has happened here? The demand has decreased, quantity demanded has decreased by 5. So this 5 is visible here. Slope means, I repeat that, slope means the change in QD when price increases by 1 rupee. But elasticity means the percentage change of quantity demanded when the price changes by a given percentage. So these are again two different concepts, right? These are again two different concepts. එනිසා මම මේකේ ආන්සර් එක මෙහෙම ලියලා තියෙනවා. No, they are not the same. The slope of the demand curve represents the change in quantity demanded when the price changes by 1 rupee. Hence, it presents the absolute change. However, PED presents a percentage change of QD when P changes by a given percentage. Hence, it represents a relative change. What I forgot to mention is actually this. I forgot this part. So it's about this. Look at this. We have one more difference between B and PED. That is, if you calculate B, I mean the slope, if you calculate the slope of the demand curve at any point on this curve, may it be at this point, may it be at this point, may it be at this point, or may it be at this point. Doesn't matter which point you consider. You just pick any point randomly and calculate the slope there. And you receive the same value at any point. You receive the same value at any point. But you pick again several points randomly and try to calculate PED at each point. If you calculate PED, taking price here and QD here, if you calculate PED at this point, wait. If you calculate PED at this point, right, it will be minus infinity. If you calculate PED at this point, it will be 0. If you calculate PED right in the middle, it will be minus 1. If you calculate PED somewhere here in the middle, it will be in between minus 1 and minus infinity. If you calculate the PED somewhere here, it will be in between, the value of PED falls in between 0 and minus 1. See, it changes. But the slope remains constant. It remains the same at any point. But the PED changes. And that's the other difference between B, the slope, and the PED. ඒකත් මම අර ආන්සර් එක ලියලා තියෙනවා. Look at this one. You just read this, you will understand it. Right, now we will move to the second question under the main question 4. The question is asking, what are the types of price elasticity of demand? See that now, these are two different concepts. In question 3, as I remember, yes, in question 3, part 3, I asked for the different forms of elasticity. See, different forms of elasticity. And there are 3 such forms. The first one is price elasticity of demand. The second one is cross price elasticity of demand. The third one is income elasticity of demand. These are the 3. And in this one, I'm asking for the different types of price elasticity of demand, which means I'm asking different types of this price elasticity of demand. Then ඒකටත් කට්ටිය මොකද කරලා තියෙන්නේ, you have written the price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and cross price elasticity of demand. That's totally wrong. First thing, you need to read the question consciously. That's the first thing. Even before you write anything, that's the first thing. So read the question consciously and then understand it. Okay. And then explain the answer using suitable diagrams. See, the requirement is to use diagrams and to explain that. Okay, so based on, as I mentioned here, when you calculate PED, you can have mainly 5 different types of values. Minus infinity, on one end you get minus infinity, on the other end you get 0, right in the middle of the curve you get minus 1, here you get a value between minus 1 and infinity, minus infinity, and here in this region you get a value between 0 and minus 1. So based on these 5 regions, we recognize 5 different types of price elasticity. The first one is perfect elastic demand, and that's where we get minus infinity for PED. The fifth one is perfectly inelastic demand, that's where we get 0 for PED. Third one is unitary elastic demand, that's where we get 1 minus 1 for PED. Here you get a value between minus 1 and minus infinity. In this region, you get a value between minus 1 and 0. If it's inelastic, the value will fall in between 0 and minus 1. Right? So these are the 5 different types of price elasticity of demand. And then you need to explain each using diagrams. If it's the perfectly elastic demand, this is the shape of the demand curve on this side. This is a mistake actually. This is a must. You need to write that on this axis you see QD and on this axis you see price. It's a must. The shape of the demand curve will be this. It is parallel to the QD axis. If the demand is perfectly elastic, the demand curve is parallel to QD axis. You need to explain all the 5. When it comes to, I'm not going to explain these because this exact same thing you have in the note. So no point of explaining that again. I mean, no point of reading that again. It's there in the note. So if you just try to recognize the differences in terms of the diagrams, when you draw the diagram for elastic demand, the slope is very, very small. The slope is very small, less steeper. But if it is for the inelastic demand, it's much more steeper, right? And if you draw a curve for a good having a unitary elastic demand, the demand curve will look like this. And this shape we recognize as a rectangular hyperbola. And if you draw a demand curve for a product with perfectly inelastic demand, right, that demand curve is parallel to the price axis. You need to label the axis. Just do that. Right. And then we'll move to, so the third one, what are the determinants of price elasticity of demand? We have recognized 6 in the note. If the number of substitutes, if there are higher number of substitutes for a good, then the PED will be high, elasticity will be high. Nature of the concerned good. If the good is an essential good, PED will be low, it will be inelastic. But if the good, the considering good is a luxury one, then the price elasticity will be high. Third one is in the percentage of income spent on the good. If you spend a lower percentage, it will be inelastic. But if you spend a higher percentage of your income on the given good, then the elasticity will be high. We have discussed all these in the class. And if you have a narrower definition on the good, then the elasticity is high. If the definition is broader, elasticity is low. In the short run, elasticity is low. In the long run, elasticity is high. And if you have so many alternative uses, elasticity is low. But if you have less number of alternative uses, elasticity is high. So that's how we have discussed them in the theory class. Right, the fourth question, why is the price elasticity of demand important? So you have 4 reasons here, just read them, you will understand. I have explained each in the class. Right, now come to the fifth question. Fifth question, part 1. What is meant by consumer outlay? Explain the relationship between consumers outlay and the elasticity of demand for a particular good. So consumers outlay means, in simple terms, consumers outlay means consumers expenditure. Now, for example, if I'm purchasing 10 units of a good at 5 rupees each, then my outlay is 50 rupees. The total expenditure that is incurred to purchase the good is a consumer's outlay. And from the producer's perspective, it's a producer's income. In a consumer's outlay is same as a producer's revenue. Both are same. When I ask a question, what is meant by consumer outlay, you just need to explain that. Right? So here I have explained that consumer's outlay refers to the total amount of money that consumers spend on a particular good or a service. And this is how we calculate it. You purchase 10 units at 5 rupees each, so that the total outlay will be 50. So that much easy. But the next part, in the next part, you just need to explain the relationship between consumer's outlay and the elasticity of demand for a particular good. So you can understand it in this way. Now, let's say that you have two, or let's say you have three tables. This is the first table. This is the second table. And this is the third table. In each table, these are the column headings. You get the price, you get the quantity demanded, you get the revenue or the outlay, consumer's outlay. P, QD, outlay. Again, you have P, QD, outlay. All right. Now, let me write 100 here, and QD is also 100. Let's assume so. And let me increase the price to 200, and the quantity demanded is just 99. Now, what type of demand you see here? Elastic demand or inelastic demand? Tell me the answer for that. What type of elasticity, what type of demand you see here? Price has doubled, but the amount of change or the percentage change in QD is very insignificant. So that we say demand is inelastic. Demand is inelastic. In the first table, demand is inelastic. Right now, let me take this one in this way. Demand is, let's say, elastic. Demand elastic කරන්න නම් අපි මෙතන 100 දාලා මෙතනත් 100 දාලා මෙතන 101 දාලා මෙතන 20 දාමු. එතකොට demand is elastic. ඒක මං හිතන්නේ නෙමෙයි, ඒක තේරෙන්න ඕනි. හරි. And then what type of a demand is this? You have 10, 200, you have 20, you get the QD 100. What type of a demand is this? Tell me. This is where you see unitary elastic demand. Unitary elastic demand. If you calculate the PED, you will receive 1. Actually, we have already calculated that. This is the exact same table that we had here. Yeah, that we had here. It's the exact same table that I have taken again. So PED is 1. Unitary elastic, right? So look at the third column, consumer's outlay. Price into quantity is 2000 here. This is also 2000. So what has happened to the consumer's outlay when the price increases? Price has gone up, but the consumer's outlay remains the same. So no changes. And in this table, let's see what has happened. Price is 100, QD is 100, this is 10,000. In the second situation, when the price is 200 and this is quantity is 99, the value will be 19,800. Consumer's outlay is 19,800. And in the second table, this is again 10,000. And in the second situation, this is 2020. 2020, yes, 2020. Now we will analyze these two tables as well. Now what has happened to the price here? Price has increased. Price has increased. And consumers' outlay has also increased. See, that's what happens when the demand is inelastic. If you are selling a product or a good having an inelastic demand, you should increase the price in order to maximize your revenue. So you should understand that. And on the other side, you see a good with elastic demand, then අර seller price එක වැඩි කරනවා බලන් ඉඳලා මේ seller price එක වැඩි කළොත් රුපියල් 1කින් what has happened to him? His revenue has drastically decreased. ඒක අනිත් එක්කෙනා කරන එක කරන්න නෙමෙයි හරි දෙන්නේ කරන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට මෙතනදී මොකද උනේ? For this given good, demand is elastic. එතකොට if the price increases at least slightly, see what has happened to the consumer's outlay or the producer's revenue, that drops significantly. And as I mentioned earlier, in this case, price has increased, but nothing has happened to the consumer's outlay. Nothing has happened. ඉතින් ඔන්න ඔය කතන්දරේ තමයි ඔය explain කරන්න ඕන. When the demand is inelastic, there is a positive relationship between P and consumer's outlay. When the demand is elastic, there's a negative relationship between P and consumer's outlay. When the demand is unitary elastic, there's no such relationship between P and consumer's outlay. So that's what you need to explain there. And I have explained the same thing, so I'm not going to read that. So I have explained the same thing. Right. And question 5, part 2, what is meant by income elasticity of demand? I explained this earlier. Actually, this is a mistake. එකම question එක දෙපාරක් ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. එකම දේ ටෙස්ට් කරන questions දෙපාරක් ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. So that's a mistake. So ignore this. There's nothing wrong here. Just ignore this, right? Then the third one is goods based on cross price elasticity of demand and income elasticity. So ඔයාටත් පුළුවන් මෙන්න මෙහෙම කරන්න. ඔයාට පුළුවන් මේ වගේ දේවල් කොළවල ලියලා පොඩි ටේබල් එකක් හදාගන්න. පොඩි ටේබල් එකක් හදාගෙන මේක ලියලා ඔයාට පේන තැන කලව ගන්න. බිත්තියේ. එතන මේක නිකම්ම මතක හිටිනවා. හරිද? මේක නිකම්ම මතක හිටිනවා. එතන මෙතන කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? When the cross price elasticity, when CED is positive, the goods are substitutes. When CED is negative, goods are complementary. When CED is 0, goods are unrelated. So a similar table I have developed even for income elasticity of demand. මෙතන පොඩි එකක් තියෙනවා. This has to be less than. When YED falls between 0 and 1, the good is essential. When YED is greater than 1, the good is luxury. When YED is negative, if it is less than 0, the good is inferior. Right? Oh my win. And then the next one, sorry, the last part, yes, the last part. What is the importance of income elasticity of demand? It's a straightforward question. You can, I mean, if you remember, you can write the answer easily. So just read these two, you will understand. So that's how we finish the discussion related to this question paper, right? That's how we finish the discussion. So we have 5 questions. We discussed all the 5, and some I skipped. Those are very easy ones. You can anyway understand. All right, so that's it then. Right, that's it then. So I believe that you all understood the things that we discussed. If not, you can again refer the notes, no problem, right? So if you didn't understand anything that I explained today, you can refer the note and check it once again. So that's what should happen. Right, so that's all for the day. And coming Friday class, we will be discussing the next chapter of the second unit, which is about the theory of supply and elasticity of supply. So that we will start next day. And Katino, good night.